Jordan's been our guy, and there's that kid's got fire in the belly. He's a competitor, and we're really confident in him.
Hockey Insider, Darren Dreger.
Yes, but does it take more than belly fire to win the Four Nations face-off? We'll start finding out tonight. Canada-Sweden at 8 o'clock here at the Bell Center. Did Darren Dreger, did he crumble? Did he spring for some tickets for this thing after all? Good morning, Dregs.
Good morning. No, I did not crumble. I did not spring for tickets. And in fact, we as a panel are doing the first game, covering the first game tonight from studio. So I'm actually not even in Montreal and won't get there until Friday. Of course, we have to be on site for the weekend and the big rivalry game against the United States. Yeah. But nonetheless, looking forward to the Four Nations getting underway tonight.
I got the spare bedroom all ready for you, Dregs.
Okay, buddy. Sounds good.
What do you think? I was pretty surprised that Jordan Binnington was the guy. I figured Adin Hill. Binnington, of course, has had success in the playoffs, but
yeah.
Adin Hill's had success more recently. What do you think of the call here?
Well, it's interesting. And as I listened to John Cooper there coming into the segment, just the mention of fire in the belly is what jumps out of that quote for me. And I feel like that's probably what the coaching staff is looking at when they're giving Jordan Binnington of the St. Louis Blues the edge here, because you're right. In pedigree alone, Adin Hill deserves that sort of footing for sure. But maybe it just takes a little bit extra juice. Clearly John Cooper and the staff are playing a bit of a hunch here. Otherwise, how do you separate the two? So that makes the most sense for me. But, talk about a short leash. Goaltending is probably the biggest question mark that Canada has going into this Four Nations face-off. And if it works for Binnington, then what's the storyline going into the game against USA on Saturday? Does Jordan hold the net for the entire event? Do you go to Adin Hill and then make your decision going into Game 3? So there are different scenarios in play.
That's the thing. That's the rub. That's the part I can't get over yet. And it's obviously why I'm on local AM radio, not coaching with Team Canada, because I can't figure this darn thing out.
No, we all know that's political, Sean.
You're right. Sorry. But now, seriously, like when we think about the best case, worst case, in my head, obviously, if he looks good against Sweden tonight just after 8 o'clock, then you're rolling with Binnington, I would think, going into the massive all eyes on Canada-USA at the Bell Center on Saturday night, because it's such a short little round robin. And I mean, Canada's involved because they want to win this darn thing, so there's very little room for experimentation, isn't there?
Yeah, that's fair. And that's why I think there was a good amount of back and forth among the group, not just the coaching staff, the group, in filling out the roster and naming Drew Doughty as the defenseman to come in for Alex Pietrangelo. And, the initial thought when it was made clear that Pietrangelo wasn't good to go was that Canada was looking for just a shutdown D-man, somebody who can kill penalties, block shots, like Chris Tanev, as an example, with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And, then Mackenzie Weegar had a bit of a push with the Calgary Flames. And, many of us thought, okay, well, how do you go wrong with either one or all three of those guys? And as we know, they go to Doughty. But I think that beyond the design and the specifics of the individuals, you do have to look at the sum of the parts. And defensively speaking, Canada should be pretty good. When you look at the blue lines across the four teams here, for me, Canada's right up there, absolutely right up there. But it's also a short prep window here too, right? So as the coaches have acknowledged, you're kind of opening the door and letting these guys play the way they're capable of playing, the way they play on a regular basis in the National Hockey League. You're not reinventing systems and redeveloping structure and all of that. So you hope that the group defends as a five-man unit, and you hope that takes some of the pressure off your goaltending. And then in this case tonight, Binnington is expected to make the saves.
Hockey Canada hiring a general manager for the program of excellence. That includes the World Juniors, where we know we've had 2 consecutive disappointing results for Canada. I'm curious your perspective on what's on the line here for Canada in this event. How important is it for Hockey Canada and the general state of the game is it that Canada looks good in this event?
Well, it is important because, every time Canada plays an international event as a superpower in hockey, the expectation is that they win. And at least the World Junior level, that's been a struggle. We'll see how Canada fares at the Olympics. But that is the level of expectation. we reported on the hiring of the general manager probably several weeks ago now. It was right after the World Junior Championship, so not that long ago. I think that this is just a recognition of how much work has to get done. And hockey operations at Hockey Canada isn't nearly as deep as it once was. It just isn't. And Scott Salmon, who is the overseer for Hockey Canada, does everything. He does everything. He does the men. He does the World Juniors. He does the women's program, the para pro. I mean, this guy does it all. So I think that this is a wise hire. They need more people involved in the process because, hey, the reality is pretty clear too. It's not like the rest of the countries around the world are sitting back and just allowing Canada and the United States to fight for gold. No, these teams are evolving and they are developing, and they've got more resources now than they've had maybe ever before. So these ads are needed by Hockey Canada just to strengthen not just, again, the programs that we focus and pay most attention to, but all the other programs that are probably suffering because of being understaffed.
We're talking to Darren Dreger, as we do every Wednesday, Friday at 8:35 here on TSN 690. I'm Connor McKenna with Sean Starr. This is Jake Evans.
It's been an honor. It's such a fun place to play, such a great place to live, and I've just really enjoyed it. It's truly an honor. It's so much tradition here. So many great players that worn this jersey with pride, and it's truly an honor.
Yeah, he started in the past tense and then I guess caught himself and talked about the present tense there. But boy, that sounds a lot like a guy who's not going to be playing for this team a month from now.
Yeah, maybe. And there's still time. We know that just listening to Jake, you would prefer, of course, to extend and stay in Montreal. And as we've talked about on the show before, he does have a unique skill set, and I think that's where the problem comes into play here. It's because he does so many things well, and when he's clicking offensively, he can generate some offense. He's proven that at the National Hockey League level. But what's the value of that? How do you put a dollar figure on that? And is it higher from the player perspective than it is from the club standpoint? And that's where we are today. I don't know exactly what the negotiation has looked like to this point in terms of the money that Jake believes he's worth, what the term is that he believes he's earned at this point of his career. But I do know that Ken Hughes and the Montreal Canadiens do appreciate and value the type of player that he is. And there is still time. But you have to take that equation and what you've learned in the negotiation and then measure that against what his trade value might be. And if his trade value is greater than what you're willing to take on as a contract and the annual average salary, then that's what the trade deadline is for. So I still think there's time. I still believe that Ken Hughes is going to try and get something done. But again, he's got to balance that, and he's got to measure that with what the trade interest is and then make his final call closer to the 7th.
Can you shed light on what you've learned around Ken Hughes as an NHL general manager? And is it directly connected to what perhaps you already knew about him as a power agent in the game? Because I'm trying to figure out what type of negotiator, what type of line drawer he is. Like, I've heard reputations of other general managers, how difficult they sometimes can be to work with, very stubborn in their ways, etc. So I'm just curious if there's any light to be cast on how Ken Hughes likes to negotiate or what area he tends to deal from.
Well, he's fair, and he would get that. From the great players that he represented as, you're right, a very powerful player agent back in the day. But that's balanced with a real strong hockey background, hockey IQ. But first and foremost, his job is to cut the best deal possible on behalf of the Montreal Canadiens. So he does have that unique skill set where he's fought for the players. He's been in the trenches. He knows all of the analytics and the data and the numbers that matter when you're going into the negotiation on behalf of the player. And now he can balance that with what he's learned in his time as general manager of the Montreal Canadiens. So it is a unique perspective. But then on top of that, you've got the experience factor of Jeff Gorton, who, during his days in hockey management, went through all kinds of tough negotiations and obviously gained and earned a lot of respect for Ken Hughes along the way in the battles that they had, which is how their relationship ultimately was forged. So it's unique. But, the fact that they work in tandem, I think makes for a better management decision. But I would say that Kent probably has all bases covered. And from a team standpoint, you don't feel like you're being cheated based on his lack of experience as a GM.
What are you expecting in the next couple of weeks from the Canadiens? Like, not specifics necessarily, more of like a general question. Is this going to be a busy couple of weeks here, or are we going to? Well, I'll let you just pick up from that.
I think it will be a busy couple of weeks, and I'm not pointing the finger at the Montreal Canadiens. I'm looking across the league, and the reason I feel like that is because there's Tiny. Good morning.
Good morning, Tiny.
Tiny.
Yeah, it's because of how active it was, and some bigger deals obviously that have already been completed, and then you've got a bit of a pause here. It's not a mandated pause. Managers are having conversations all this week, and maybe that puts them in a better position to pull the trigger at the conclusion of the Four Nations, unless it's lower level stuff that really isn't going to upstage in any manner what's going on in Montreal and then what's going on in Boston. So then you come out of Four Nations, and the window looks a lot smaller between then and the 7th of March. And so that's the sense that I'm getting. I think Ken Hughes is open to just about anything. Now, we're not talking about, big name, higher level stuff. He's not going to tear apart his roster, but I don't know how many times he has to say, either privately or publicly, that their focus is on continuing to build what they have for the future, not for the now. Not for the now. It doesn't mean, though, that you turn your back on an opportunity that makes you better now, because chances are, if you add those pieces or that piece that makes you better now, it's probably a player coming in that has term, that is going to help you not just now, but in the future as well. So that's when I look bigger picture at the Montreal Canadiens without being specific to a player that they might be targeting. I think that's where I'm open to the possibility beyond some of the depth pieces or trading a veteran defenseman and getting a draft pick or a prospect. If there's the right player potentially available and Hughes doesn't have to tear up his roster, then why wouldn't he be open to that idea?
And just a fun question before we let you go here about what's more likely, Armia or Evans gets dealt before the 7th of March? Like, I'm just wondering if there's a world that exists in which those guys are still on the Canadiens roster on March 8th.
You're saying which one is more likely?
Yeah, in your point of view.
Yeah. Well, I'm hesitating because I think both have some depth of value. I do. I think the value in Jake Evans is probably more significant as a free agent. But if you're a team that likes, the character that Jake Evans is going to bring into your lineup, the game that he plays, how gritty, how physical he can be, all of that, maybe you want to get a head start on free agency and bring him in now. If you're a contending team that feels like you just want a little bit more edge, in your bottom six, okay, he's got that. And Armia he's been moved a couple of times, so it's not like that is new to him, but I would put him into a depth situation as well. So I'm more intrigued with Jake Evans than I am Armia, but that's not necessarily how a general manager might look at it. It's more from, okay, we've seen Armia in the past, so what about Jake Evans, and how does that look in a different environment?
It's Darren Dreger going to be in town this weekend for the Four Nations face-off. Anything on the bucket list other than watching some hockey?
No, not really. I always enjoy and appreciate being in Montreal. I'm trying to, since the turn of the calendar, January 1st, I've tried to clean up my act a little bit. So
you're coming to the wrong place in that case.
Yeah, well, that's exactly my point. That's exactly the point I'm making. Although I haven't mapped out, the special dinner or any of that just yet.
Yep.
But undoubtedly, with Jeff O'Neill and Mike Johnson and James Duffy, we'll end up at a pretty nice spot on probably Friday night. I guess Friday night would be the night we do that.
Who
Nice.
picks the spot? I mean, I would imagine Mike Johnson's got the most Montreal.
Expense report.
He's got the most Montreal experience. Does he make the call? Or?
He could also go lone wolf, though. So maybe he just ditches us, and it's just the three of us in like the hotel lobby restaurant or something. I don't know. I'll leave that to the guys are on the trail more than I am.
All right. Well, let us know if you need any recommendations or anything like that. We'll get you covered. Thanks, Dregs.
Okay, guys. Thank you.